Hey, this is Aaron from Night Combat Solutions. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Armasight Drone Pro. It's a digital night vision weapons sight that's much cheaper than Gen 3. Now, most of you know me as an I² fan, but digital's really advanced in the past few years to where it becomes a viable night vision option for those that don't want to drop the money on a Gen 3 device or even a high-end Gen 2 device. It also has some certain features that you just can't get with I², like the ability to record through a DVR or take still pictures or even change reticles. One of the drawbacks to digital is that it's not a light amplification device. That said, you can just use an illuminator. With an illuminator, there's not really any drawback, especially in a hunting situation where it's actually an advantage to be able to shine the eyes of the animals you're looking for. The one downside to an illuminator is that if you're up against an adversary that has night vision capabilities, you're going to stand out like a sore thumb if you're running any type of active IR illumination or a laser. But typically people in those jobs are going to go with a different device. But for a law enforcement aspect, digital is viable because you can record any operation through the unit. I'll start with the basic Drone Pro. Now this year, for 2014, they do have a tan version, which is pretty cool. I like the tan, and a lot of people do. It's got 5x optical magnification, which is important because when you try to use digital zoom, you start to get pixelation and your image gets worse and worse as you zoom in. There's also the 10x version, which is basically the 5x scope with an optical doubler. Your power switch is back here on the rear, and it's a pull switch. You pull clockwise and it turns on, the middle is off, counterclockwise is standby. And like Armasight's other weapons mounted platforms, the standby position is so that you can use an included wireless pressure switch that allows you to leave the unit off and activate it momentarily only when necessary. And that's a really cool feature, like I've mentioned in other videos, where if you're running helmet mounted night vision or thermal handheld scanner, you can leave those two devices on all the time while you're scanning without having to point a weapon everywhere. But when you do find a target you want to engage, simply press the button and momentarily turn on your night vision, engage the target, and preserve batteries. You'll notice the top has several different buttons, and these control all your different menu features. The center brings up a standard menu that allows you to choose reticles and several different options. The rear button and the front button, known as 1 and 3, adjust your brightness up and down respectively. It takes two CR123 batteries and has a runtime of about 4 hours. Now, I² night vision, you're going to get a longer runtime, but with an LCD screen and basically a camera inside this, it's going to draw more power. But that's really where your standby selection comes in handy, and you can just run it with that pressure switch. And most people aren't going to leave a weapon sight on all night during an outing. They're just going to use it when needed. Now, that said, if you need more battery life, there's a port on the right-hand side that allows you to plug in an external battery pack and almost triple that runtime. In addition, you can also plug your DVR into this port and record video through it. Some of the other good features about digital is that it's not light sensitive as an I² device is, meaning if you turn on your I² device in a room that's lit like this without the pinhole cover on, you're going to burn that tube and ruin a very expensive tube. That said, you can even burn a spot in the image of an I² device with the day cover on if you're not careful. With digital, you don't run that risk. You don't have an intensifier tube to burn. It's also not recoil sensitive. In an I² device, under recoil while the unit is powered on, you run the possibility of the MCP flexing and making contact with the photocathode that will basically ruin the device. You'll get spots in the image. With a digital, that's not the case. Probably the weakest link in a digital or a thermal is the LCD display, but it can handle some serious recoil that most I² devices can't. Now, both Drone Pros come with a QD base with 2 locking levers. And I've found this base to be really repeatable because sometimes I will switch between a day optic with like an ADM or Bobro QD mount and run this night vision at night and switch back and forth. And very rarely have I ever had a POI shift, and it's usually because of foreign debris or getting into the wrong slot. As the other Armasight QD mounts on their clip-ons and I-squared weapon sights and their thermals, it can be adjusted without tools. With the levers in the open position, simply push against the lever and it exposes the nut on the back side, and you can tighten it or loosen it as needed for out-of-spec rails. And the 10X version is virtually identical, like I mentioned earlier. You just have that optical doubler, and you can remove that optical doubler and run it in a 5X mode. Now be aware that in the field, if you decide to put your doubler on while running it without it, you could have some POI shift. That's not the case all the time, but you need to be familiar with your gear, and any gear, not just night vision for that matter, to make sure of those issues before you go out. And you'll notice on the front of this device is your focus ring. Back here is your ocular focus, and that's going to allow you to adjust the unit for your eyesight. The front one is a distance focus. It'll focus from 10 yards to infinity. And that's really good because with the digital you do have some range. As long as you have a really good illuminator, such as the IR850W or some of the other illuminators out there, you can get some serious distance out of a digital. Whereas a few years ago, you're talking a 50-yard device. Now you're up in the hundreds of yards. So that said, I feel like this is kind of the peak of consumer digital technology in a weapons mounted platform, aside from the clip-ons. There's other digital clip-ons and weapon sights out there, but they're not the same quality as the Armasight Drone Pro or the Cypher. So when you're looking for a digital, give this a hard look. Hey, this is Aaron from Night Combat Solutions. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Armasight Drone Pro. It's a digital night vision weapon sight that's much cheaper than Gen 3. Now, most of you know me as an I-squared fan, but digital's really advanced in the past few years to where it becomes a viable night vision option for those that don't want to drop the money on a Gen 3 device or even a high-end Gen 2 device. It also has some certain features that you just can't get with I-squared, like the ability to record through a DVR or take still pictures or even change reticles. One of the drawbacks